You're listening to the Brave Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Susan Maples. I'm here for all parents who deeply love their children and want their health span to equal their lifespan. In other words, to be healthy their entire lives. If that's you, tune in. In every episode, we're grappling with contemporary issues that affect every child every day in areas that your doctors either don't know or don't have time to tell you. It's your time to be brave. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Susan Maples. Welcome to the very first episode of our podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Many people want to know right off the bat, who is this? Who am I talking to? I am a 36-year, can't believe it's been that long, total health dentist. I work with patients every day. And in doing so, I've seen the decline in health in our population, and it breaks my heart. And I know if we raise a crop of kids who really get it, we can change the health trajectory we see today. And I know that you are interested in your child being part of that. So what does that mean, a total health dentist? First of all, I do a lot of research and I do a lot of collaborating with medical professionals, and I serve as a surrogate brave parent. I help kids unravel some of their most significant issues and adults, and help them, again, learn how to choose a healthier lifestyle. I believe that each and every one of us wants to be healthier than we are. That's part of how we're driven, unless there's significant depression. And we'll talk about that later. But most of us want to be healthier, and to arm people with the skills, beliefs, and behaviors to do that, and to help them practice some resolve, because truly we're living in a culture that lets resolve sort of fly out the window whenever we're stressed. And again, we'll talk more about that. But that's what I'm supposed to do. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I met a new patient who was 8 years old, and he's a pretty delightful kid, clearly overweight at 8 years old, and he's a competitive wrestler. And his mom tells me in front of the child that he's been diagnosed with ADHD. And I look on his medication list, and sure enough, he's taking Ritalin, which is an amphetamine. It's an upper stimulant. And I know that 37% of kids who have been diagnosed with ADHD have really a sleep-related breathing disorder or a sleep starvation. And those sleep deprivation symptoms sound very much the same as ADHD. So the misdiagnosis is often there. And when we misdiagnose and we give someone a stimulant and rob them of more of their sleep, they seem to get worse. So I start to ask a little bit more about sleep. And his mom says, he sleeps soundly once he gets to sleep, but it takes him hours to get to sleep. And I said to the little boy, wow, that must be frustrating. He said, it is frustrating. I don't quite know what to do. And I said, well, tell me about that. I said, what's happening for you? What helps you sleep better? And he said, well, if I take a really long walk, I sleep a lot better. And I said, oh, exercise. That's great. I said, do you exercise regularly? He said, only during wrestling season. I said, well, that's something you could probably work on and, sort of discipline yourself to get some exercise regularly so you sleep better. I said, let me ask you another question. Do you worry at night while you're lying there by yourself? And he said, yes, sometimes I do. And then I can't get my worries out of my mind. And I said, have you thought about maybe sitting down with mom or dad and creating a worry time at a different time of day where you could express your worries and then maybe write them down and maybe put them in a box and kind of close the box so you don't take your worries with you to at bedtime? And he goes, wait a minute, you're a dentist, right? And I said, yes. And he said, why are you asking me so much about sleep and worry? And I said, well, because I want to care about all of you. I care about you. And he looks right at his dad and he goes, I like it here. And that just made me feel so good. And I just know that I think that we can all do better in healthcare to see kids, and especially to partner with parents when sometimes in their busy schedule and they see kids every day, they don't necessarily see significant changes, and we can all sort of collaborate together. So I've seen a lot because I've been looking, and I hope that the insights that I bring forward for you in the book, Brave Parent, and in this podcast will help you see your kids differently and yourselves. That's really critical too. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So let me tell you about the book. Brave Parent um, came to me. It's not my first book, but it is the first research book that I've done that really tackles the breadth of contemporary issues outside of oral health and the links between oral health and systemic health. There is some oral health in here, but really it's a book that begins with what we all think a lot about, which is relationships to food and food itself. And then how to unravel what to drink besides water, and even water. We're so confused about, filtration and fluoride and sparkling and not sparkling. And, can you drink vitamin water and all of that? So there's a whole chapter on that. And then breathing, which is super important, and sleeping. So breath and sleep sort of go together. And we look at sleep related breathing disorders and sleep hygiene, disciplining ourselves to help kids get the sleep that they need. And then there's a chapter on social, emotional, and cognitive health, everything from bullying and social media and screen time to anxiety, depression, and addiction, and the cascade of problems that get kids into trouble for lifelong um, um, problems. We are also dealing in there with mindfulness and ways to help kids with stress and coping mechanisms. And then we have a really nice chapter on oral health, which is all of the issues that, I don't know if people even realize that caries disease, the disease of tooth decay, which can be devastating, is the #1 disease for children. But we also in there start to talk about oral pharyngeal cancer, and oral sex, and talking to kids about sex and the causes of cancer, as well as why kids grind teeth, and what our orthodontic expectations are, and all of the issues we deal with around future prevention of gum disease or periodontal disease. And then we move on to one of my favorite chapters, which is movement, exercise science, cardio versus weights. How do we get kids to foster daily exercise, knowing that it's the way we're wired to be? And how do we, our organized sports, what are the benefits and drawbacks of organized sports, and how do we create lifelong activities with our children? And I missed one of the sections, which is one of my favorites, and it is digest, which is microbial health. It's really fostering good gut health, everything from C-sections and vaccinations to clean versus dirty, over sanitizing our world. Is it okay to have dogs? What about allergies? Why have those spiked? Asthma and autoimmune problems. So an evidence-based book that deals with what I believe are all the problems we see today. When I see sick adults, I think they've been sick kids and no one recognized it. And how do we really look at those upstream efforts before they fall in the river and we're having to save them and placate their diseases with medications that pollute their bodies? And when I say pollute, oftentimes the side effects from the medications are worse than the medications themselves. So 36 years ago, when I started in dentistry, let me tell you, the medications list were this big. Now they're this big. And I am like, wow, this is really hard to get people to demedicate after they become accustomed to all this. So how is it that we help your kids grow up healthy without medications, which really reduces their risk of addiction? So all of that to say, I'm here for you. I'm excited to respond to your questions, to make the podcast everything you want it to be instead of what I want it to be. Because let's face it, many of your questions that you've grappled with for a long time are the ones where the solutions will feel like just a huge eye opener for you. And I want that for you. I want to answer some of your questions. Many of you have, every child is different, and many of you have your own journey so far. And so many people have questions that it seems like either your pediatrician or family doc doesn't have time to answer, or they don't know. So with that said, this book is also for you. I know that in writing the book, young physician who did the research citations, the organization of the citations after each chapter, at the end of the project, she said, I've never done this, but I reread the entire book for me. I felt like I was parenting myself. And I know that before kids, there was you, and after kids, there will be you. And we sort of lose ourselves in our kids. During pregnancy is sort of the first time that parents really start to go, oh my gosh, I'm caring for this other child. I want to treat my body like a temple. And they're willing to do very heroic things for themselves because they're literally forming another person inside them. And after the child leaves the womb, oftentimes we sacrifice ourselves for our kids. I'd love for you to be able to see your body and your mind and your spirit as one that you want to hold up in, take really good care of yourself, to set really good examples for self-care and self-love and self-worthiness, and grace when you're struggling, and to be able to take good care of yourself because you literally can't pour from an empty vessel. So to be the best parent, we also have to really take good care of ourselves, but we also want to do it to set good examples for kids so they can draw boundaries around peer pressure and around other kids asking them to do things that might be harmful to them. I think we all as parents, I know I did, struggled with never enough. I have to be this person at work and come home and have a healthy meal and spend time with my child and make sure the homework is done. And I'm sacrificing sleep time because I don't have time. We haven't had enough time together. And then you go to bed feeling guilty that they got to bed late. And there's this overwhelming sense of never enough. That is not what this book is about, to create more deficit for you. This book is an encouragement. It's a way to help you build strategy out loud with your kids, to set some resolve so that kids know expectations. They know your expectations and they're not negotiating with you any longer. And that way, when they grow up and realize all that you've given them, they're so grateful for you. I can't tell you how nice it was this week when my son, who's 28, and you'll read a lot about him in the book, was listening to it on Audible and called me and said, I really like your book. And I was so nervous because, of course, I tell a million of his stories. And, my effort to raise a healthy child was very impactful for him and for me. It took a lot of courage to do that. Again, against all odds. We didn't watch a lot of TV. We played outside a lot, did a lot of support of his academic prowess, but we also tried to really balance a life to respect the world we live in, the community, the environment, our bodies, be mindful of, talking about emotions, all of that. So it was really gratifying to hear that. And I hope that your kids, I know that your kids, guaranteed, if you read this book, it'll change the health trajectory of your kids' lives and they will come back to thank you. I also believe it's important that we learn to build a community around them so they don't feel like the weirdo. They're not coming home going, in Joey's house, they're allowed to have their cell phones at the table. Why can't I? Or, he has all this privacy. No one watches his apps. Or he's allowed to watch TV and leave the TV on even to go to sleep. Why can't I? So a lot of it is trying to organize a group of parents who understand what it takes to grow a healthy child, and then build a community around that. So your kid's not the weirdo. Again, once you know what to do, finding the resolve to stick to it does mean that we can do that better if we have outside community support. If you're not the mean mom who brings carrots and apples to a child's or sliced avocados, God forbid, after a sporting event, rather than Rice Krispie treats and, blue Gatorade and hot Cheetos, why, how do we bring that in check? And I'm sort of being facetious because certainly homemade oatmeal cookies work too. But I think the whole idea is that we create a community, and this Brave Parent effort, my vision is that we create a movement of brave parents willing to put in the time and effort it takes to raise a healthy group of kids that will grow up and influence their peers, that will make a difference. I can tell you who's not helping: the food manufacturers, the drink manufacturers, the pharmaceutical companies, the drug pushers of recreational drugs, the tobacco industry that's really excited about the fact that all these kids are vaping. they're not willing to help us. And they have big money. And if they're listening right now, they're really pissed off at what I'm saying. We need to create grassroots efforts that combat those organizations that are making money on the backs of our illness. And I'm not trying to be a vigilante here. I'm just saying it is up to you, brave parents, to create this environment for your child. And you have a very short window of time to do that, because peer pressure starts to take over. And even if they're making decisions that are unhealthy for them outside of your household, they will know when they're making unhealthy decisions. And ultimately, they return back to your values. But you have a pretty short window to be able to live the values, not just speak of them, and to work together. That doesn't mean you're perfect, but when you're struggling, you're going to them for help. When they're struggling, they're coming to you for help, because they know that we're in it together. And that's really the essence of it. So what can you expect from this podcast? I think that we're going to try to grapple with each one of the chapters and pull out some things that might be big aha moments for you. Some of them you'll know, and some of them will be like, wow, I never saw that. But I would love to hear from you, because as you read through the book and have questions or things that really stand out to you, you'd like to hear more. I mean, those are things that we'll want to address in each episode, rather than leaving it to me and my book designer, Lauren Eckhart, who's so lovely. I can't wait for you to meet her. And she's been impacted by the work, and she's changed my life and her enthusiasm for this. And we're going to do this podcast together, and we'll have some guests on there too. So we're going to take each one of the chapters. And I also want to address some other areas that you might be wondering about, like, how much control should I have over my child at school? Like, the helicopter parenting, the kindness that we have. How do we be firm and be kind? How do we apologize and set examples of that? How do we refrain from being a know-it-all instead of being a learn-it-all and ask-it-all, and diving in to learn together with our children and stimulate their learning around their bodies and around health? So all of those tricky issues we're going to grapple with, and we're going to have a lot of fun during this. I know there will be a lot of humor. You'll get to know my naughtiness, my fun humor, and hopefully I'll get to know yours through some of the questions you're asking. But I am a very real person. There's nothing about health I won't talk about. So we'll talk about burping, bloating, nausea, constipation, diarrhea, pooping, wakefulness, agitation, snarkiness, all the things that we wonder, how do we deal with this today? So a lot of that will come forward, and I'm really looking forward to that. The chapters, the episodes ahead of each of the chapters, the ones that go forward, will really be stimulated by what you are interested in. So I would love for you to connect to beabraveparent.com and get on the newsletter, and you can see the podcast offerings there. And I also want you to use Facebook at Be a Brave Parent to contact me with questions or curiosities that you might have that would stimulate more discussion between Lauren and I. And also, if there are any resources that you would like me to include as interviews. I have, of course, many friends in professional circles that are passionate about children's health, and I'm excited for you to meet through these episodes. But if you have people that really should be included in this podcast, I'd love to know that as well. So I look forward to being with you very soon, where we'll tackle our very first episode from within the book, that is the section on eat. It's relationships to food and what to eat and when to eat it, and how to grow a healthy kid with healthy relationships to food that can control their own hunger and appetite without portion control, that know what nourishes their body. And we've developed quite a nice formula for that. And I hope that you will enjoy that, and that it will make a difference for you, for your family, for your children, for the ever-loving rest of their ever-loving little lives. So I hope you'll join me very next time. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the Brave Parent Podcast with your host, Dr. Susan Maples, author of Brave Parent, and Lauren Eckert, founder of Burning Soul Press. Be sure to leave a podcast review and grab your copy of Brave Parent on Amazon or Audible or wherever you choose to buy your books. Bye for now.